Welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Matt Podcast. As always, I am your host, Metal Matt. So, let's go ahead and get things started. And this episode will be on a band that I believe I have mentioned a few times before. I believe I have mentioned them as one of my favorite bands of all time. And that band is Slayer. Yes, we are going to be doing a Slayer discography retrospective. And this is an episode that I've been wanting to do for quite a while now. I've always wanted to do a Slayer episode, a Slayer retrospective. And considering that at the time I'm recording this, today, their brand new album, Repentals, has come out, I felt that it was the perfect time to go ahead and do this. So, let's go ahead and get this episode started. First of all, some shout-outs. First of all, Chucky's Playground, great place to be. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't been on it, check it out. Just awesome place to be. We're talking about all kinds of things, Chucky-related, non-Chucky-related, just all kinds of stuff to talk about. So definitely check it out because it's just a great place to be. Awesome place to hang out. And Movie Mayhem with Spanky and G. If you haven't heard that podcast, definitely check it out. Very entertaining podcast. Very enjoyable to listen to. The chemistry between those two is awesome. They talk about all kinds of movies. So if you haven't heard it, definitely check it out because it's absolutely phenomenal. So now we're going to be talking about Slayer. And the way I first got into Slayer was, this is going to sound a little bit cliche, kind of, but Guitar Hero 3 was actually the first time I had ever heard Slayer. Their song Rain and Blood is on there, and it's one of the toughest songs on there. Like, believe me, I've spent many nights trying to pass that on expert, and I just could not do it. But yeah, so that's where I first heard about Slayer, back when that game first came out in 2007. Then after that, I really wanted to know more about Slayer, because I really like that thrash metal. I like the fact that they were able to play that fast and that heavy. And so I went on iTunes and I downloaded both Rain and Blood as well as Angel of Death, from the Rain and Blood album, and really great. And over time, I started discovering, all their discography, how many great albums, how many great songs that they've done. So that's pretty much what we want to be looking at today. So let's go ahead and start with their first album, their debut album, and that is Show No Mercy. And this came out on December 3rd, 1983. And this one, I'd say this one is pretty okay in terms of debut albums, much like a lot of debut albums. It really does not have great production. I would just say that right now. Not very good production. I don't know how much it costs necessarily. I know that it's been said that they were forced to self-finance their debut album, because they were on Metal Blade Records at the time. So they combined the savings of Tom Araya, the vocalist, and he was actually employed as a respiratory therapist, which is actually pretty interesting, and money that was borrowed from guitarist Kerry King's father. So the lineup right here on this particular album, lineup consists of Tom Araya, who plays bass and lead vocals, Jeff Hanneman, lead guitar and rhythm guitar, Kerry King, who also plays the lead and rhythm guitar, and Dave Lombardo. And this is basically like the classic lineup that I think everybody knows. And so, yeah, the production on here, really nothing great. Honestly, it really isn't. A lot of debut albums don't really have that great production. Like, it's very raw, but I think in some ways it sort of fits Slayer's music, especially this album. This has some pretty good songs on it. The Antichrist is pretty good as well. Evil Has No Boundaries is a great opener as well. Die by the Sword is great as well. Black Magic, which was the first song I had heard from this particular album, and this one was really good as well. So overall, it's a pretty solid album. There's really not too much to say. The production is lacking, but it's understandable because they had a pretty low budget for this one, I believe. So, it's pretty solid. If you want to see how Slayer started, if you're kind of curious about how Slayer started, what they sounded like at first, I'd say check it out. But I think there's much better albums for Slayer on the horizon, but this was truly the beginning of what would be known as the Slayer era. And so after this, we get their second album, Hellaweight, and this was released in March 1985. And this one, and what was so cool about Show No Mercy is that it became Metal Blade Records' highest selling, album. It became great. And, 5,000 copies was the label's average, selling point, I guess. Highest selling records that they've ever had. Show No Mercy actually sold 15,500 copies to 20,000 copies in the United States. And went on to sell over 15,000 overseas. So, yeah, in terms of Metal Blade, it was really a success, compared to other Metal Blade Records stuff. And so this one is actually a bit better than Show No Mercy, I think, because it has slightly higher production values. And this one, it's very Merciful Fate inspired. Like, really, if you listen to it, you can truly tell that it's very Merciful Fate inspired, because it's a bit progressive, and also some of the songs are actually 6 minutes, and I really like that kind of metal, that kind of progressive metal. And I really like the intro to this Hellaweight. Great intro, definitely very Slayer-esque. It has Join Us backmask, which I'm sure pleased a lot of parents back then. But great. And At Dawn They Sleep, Necrophiliac, Curse of Eternity. Just a lot of great ones. And this only has 7 tracks on it. So it kind of seems like it's not very long, but it's actually 37 minutes, because like I said, a lot of the songs are, 6 minutes. And just a really good, second record. It's a lot better than the first one. I mean, there's really not that much to say about this one. I'd say this is a pretty good record. It's definitely an improvement over Show No Mercy, but we're just getting started with this one. Slayer, we're just getting started, And so next up, we have what could very well be their best album, their magnum opus, and that's Rain and Blood. And this was released on October 7th, 1986, and this was the first album of Slayers to be released on Def Jam Records. And this was their first collaboration with Rick Rubin, who produced it. I think he was really a big help to them, because it truly helped Slayer define who they were. It helped them evolve. Obviously, a lot better production values here. And, this one, great songs on here. Pretty much a top-to-bottom album, basically. Like, every song on here is just great. Angel of Death starts it off, like I said, one of the first Slayer songs I had ever heard. And really good song. And it's about Nazi physician Joseph Mengele, or however you say it. And he conducted human experiments at Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. So it's a really interesting song lyrically. And then we have Altar Sacrifice, Jesus Saves, Criminally Insane, all good songs. Postmortem, Rain and Blood, like I said, the first Slayer song I had ever heard. And Jesus Saves is a really interesting song, has a really interesting intro. Or I think it's Criminally Insane. Yeah, it's Criminally Insane. Criminally Insane is the one with the interesting drum intro. It is a really good drum intro by Dave Lombardo. So this one, I think it's the first album really where, you really look at it. As soon as you hear it, you know that it's Slayer, And Rain and Blood, probably one of my favorite, songs. Probably my favorite Slayer song. I don't know. Like, there's so many Slayer songs that are great. And the concept deals with religion, which is a favorite subject of Slayer's. So, overall, this one, great thrash metal record. If I would say, if you had to start with a Slayer album, if you want to try and get into Slayer, and you weren't really sure which album to start with, I would say start with this one, most definitely, and then work your way up. Because this one, when you get down to it, is just pure, unadulterated Slayer. And, first thing I think of when I think of Slayer is Rain and Blood. So, it's fast, it's heavy, it's pretty much everything you think of when you think of Slayer. And so, Rain and Blood, great album. So now we move on to their next album, South of Heaven. And this was released on July 5th, 1988. Much like the last one, this was released on Def Jam Records. And it was produced by Rick Rubin along with Slayer themselves. And this one is a bit different from the other Slayer albums. Because this one, Slayer they kind of go down in tempo. They're not really as fast as their previous albums, but they slow it down just a little bit. Sort of like mid-tempo, almost kind of doom metal in a sense. And they utilize undistorted guitars, toned down vocals. So it's a bit different from what they had usually did. But I really like this one. I really do. I would say that it's on par with Rain and Blood. It's just a great album. The intro, South of Heaven, pretty much, it really has you invested in this album. It has you know what kind of album you want to be listening to. And you get Silent Scream, which is great. Live Undead, Behind the Crooked Cross. That one's really good as well. Mandatory Suicide, Cleanse the Soul. And we have a really cool Judas Priest cover with Descendant Aggressor. That's very good as well. Spill the Blood, which closes the album, great as well. So overall, great album. If you're a fan of the hard-hitting, very fast-paced Slayer stuff, you're probably not going to like this one. While there are fast songs on here. I'd say it's sort of almost half and half, but not really. But there's still some fast songs on here, but for the most part, it's sort of slowed down, sort of mid-tempo, slow, kind of stuff like that. But I don't think it ever gets boring. I don't think it ever truly becomes, a very boring album. I was entertained by it. So, if you're a fan of the fast-paced Slayer album, you might like some songs on here, but probably not all of them. But, if you're a big metal fan, if you're a fan of the doom metal kind of stuff, I think you'll like this one. I think this is really good. And so, next up is Seasons in the Abyss. And this was released on October 9th, 1990. And this one was really good. This was really good. Rain and Blood had fast-paced thrash metal. South of Heaven had slow-paced thrash metal. This one is truly the best of those worlds. Alright, this album is really half and half on that kind of stuff. Half of the album, very fast paced kind of thrash metal, like Warren's Ensemble. It's sort of that thrash metal kind of stuff. And other stuff like Expendable Youth or Dead Skin Mask. Yeah, I like that stuff. I could have seen on South of Heaven. And so some of these are just really phenomenal. Dead Skin Mask and Season in the Abyss in particular, some of my favorite Slayer songs. And on here, it sort of seems like they sort of go to horror in real life. They start writing kind of real life kind of subjects. For the past several albums, they were writing about demonic visions. But here they were kind of talking about real life stuff, like Dead Skin Mask. It's about a serial killer, and so yeah, this and War Ensemble obviously about war, and then gang violence and expendable youth, nuclear war, and skeletons of society. Lyrically really interesting, musically, definitely a best of both worlds scenario. Like, if you liked both Rain and Blood and South of Heaven, like, even if you liked at least one of those, you'll find something good about it. And that's really what the cool thing is about this album, is that there's really something for every Slayer fan. If you like the fast-paced stuff, you're going to find some great stuff on here. If you like the slow-paced stuff, yeah, you're going to like this one here. If you're a fan of both of them, you're going to love this album. And Seasons in the Abyss, which closes the album, 6 minutes and 36 seconds, which is really good. I think that might have been like the longest song that they had done at that point. I don't know. But at the same time, a really good album. Like, most of the album just great, Like, probably tied up with South of Heaven, Rain and Blood. Like, this is truly Slayer in their prime. Like, they could do no wrong here. So overall, Seasons in the Abyss, great album. If you haven't heard it, definitely check it out, along with South of Heaven and Rain and Blood. And so we then move on to their next album, Divine Intervention, released on September 27th, 1994. And this one, I'll go ahead and say it, this is probably my favorite Slayer record. My personal favorite Slayer record. This was the first album to feature a lineup change. The drummer, Dave Rombaugh, ended up getting replaced, ended up leaving the band, and ended up getting replaced by Paul Bostaph. And personally, I really like both drummers. There's sort of a debate over who is better, Paul Bostaph or Dave Rombaugh. I think a lot of people will say that Dave Rombaugh is better. I think they're even. I think they are pretty evenly matched, But this is really good. This is a really good album. I really like this. The track listing, Killing Fields, opening track, which was pretty cool. Sex, Murder, Art. That's really good as well. Ditto Head, that's a really great one as well. Circle of Beliefs. Serenity and Murder. That's probably one of my favorite Slayer tracks. I think that's a really cool one. And 213, that's a great one. Mind Control, which closes the album, that's a really cool one as well. So, just a lot of great songs on here. I really like it. In a time where everyone in metal was sort of trying to get with the times in terms of grunge, trying to stay hip and try and stay modern. Slayer just kept doing what they were doing. They kept doing, the thrash metal. And this one, in terms of style, I'd say this is sort of, again, kind of like Seasons of the Abyss. It's still kind of, sort of a best of both worlds kind of situation. but you could still tell that this was great. I really like this album. I really do. Like I said, my personal favorite Slayer record, and the lyrics are pretty good as well. And the lyrics come from television. They were inspired by people like Rush Limbaugh and Jeffrey Dahmer, and serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. And so this one, lyrics are really good. Music is really good as well. So I definitely recommend this particular Slayer album. I think it's really good. If you haven't heard it, definitely check it out. Highly recommend it. Just awesome. And then the next one that we have is a bit of a unique Slayer album because for the most part, it's a covers album. And we're going to be talking about Undisputed Attitude. And this was released on May 28, 1996. And this one almost entirely punk rock, hardcore punk kind of stuff. Re-recordings, well, not re-recordings, cover songs. And I'll be honest, I'm really not a huge fan of cover albums. And I think I may have said that before, but I'm not too big on cover albums. I'm just not. I don't know. Like some cover albums can be good, but other albums can sort of miss the mark as well. So they're sort of hit or miss with me. But this one, I'd say this one is pretty okay. I mean, it's really nothing great, but it's nothing awful as well. You know, it's worthwhile. You know, it's worth your time. You know, and a lot of the songs, interestingly enough, are about a minute or 2 minutes long because punk rock songs, you know, they were really short. You know, they didn't really have too much to say. Like they were usually minute, 2 minutes long. They were short, simple, to the point kind of stuff. So this covers, you know, artists like Verbal Abuse, Minor Threat, Dr. No, The Stooges. And this one is actually pretty decent, you know. And it also has two recordings of stuff that Jeff Hanneman had written for a mid-'80s side project called Pap Smear. And those are Can't Stand You and DDAMM, or Drunk Drivers Against Mad Mothers. And those are pretty cool. And, you know, the songs like Verbal Abuse / Leeches in a lot of these. And there are some songs that are sort of like medleys of two songs, you know. But Verbal Abuse / Leeches, that one's very good as well. Particularly the Verbal Abuse section. I really like that one. And Guilty of Being White, that's a cool song as well. I Hate You, that's a really good one as well. And I think that one was released as a single as well. And the band Verbal Abuse really, that one was really, that really got Verbal Abuse pretty popular in America or something after this one. Because I think, you know, after that cover, a lot of people were really curious as to who exactly, you know, Verbal Abuse was. And they sort of got a resurgence in popularity after someone as big as Slayer covered them. But then we also have stuff like Filler / I Don't Want to Hear It. Particularly the I Don't Want to Hear It section is pretty cool as well. And Mr. Freeze, which is great as well. Violent Pacification is really good as well. I really like that one. And Richard Hung Himself, which was done by the band D.I., that was really cool as well. And they also redo the Stooges song, I Want to Be Your Dog. And they do it as I'm Gonna Be Your God, which is actually kind of fitting when it comes to Slayer. And the last one on the album is actually a Slayer original. It's called Gemini. And this one is pretty okay. You know, it's really nothing special, I guess. But in terms of a Slayer song, it's cool, I guess. You know, I don't know if it would sound like a outtake from Divine Intervention. It kind of does. I think it would be cool to see Slayer kind of do like a punk rock original. Sort of like what Aerosmith did on their cover album, "Honkin' on Bobo," which they did a lot of blues songs. They did a blues-inspired song, so that would have been cool. And they sort of do kind of it's sort of punkish in a way, but I'd say it's pretty decent. So overall, Undisputed Attitude, um, it's okay, I guess. Like it's definitely not the best Slayer album in the world, you know. But that doesn't really have to be because it's a cover album, so it kind of excuses it. If you're curious as how Slayer sounds when they're doing punkish kind of things, when they're doing punk rock, if you're curious about that, I'd say this is worth the listen because it's pretty cool to see Slayer sort of do like not necessarily go all the way punk, but they really do kind of do this like crossover thrash or crossover punk, so it's sort of a combination between the two. So overall, Undisputed Attitude, I'd probably recommend it. I think a lot of it sounds really good. The songs I mentioned are Verbal Abuse / Leeches, DDAMM, I Hate You, I Don't Want to Hear It, Mr. Freeze, Violent Participation. I would recommend those in particular because I think those are the strongest songs on the album. So overall, I think Undisputed Attitude is a pretty solid covers album. So next up, we get Diabolis in Musica, and this was released on June 9th, 1998. And this one is a bit of controversial album because it's probably Slayer's most experimental album. This one, I don't know. Like, this one, I didn't really care for that much, honestly. It definitely has a bit of nu metal kind of inspiration to it. And while I like nu metal, I don't like all nu metal. I can tolerate some of it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I can tolerate, some nu metal, but not all of it. Like Linkin Park, personally, I cannot stand Linkin Park, honestly. If you like them, that's awesome. But personally, for me, I'm not a fan. So that kind of nu metal, I'm not too big a fan of. But I can like some of it. But anyway, this one, they don't really go like nu metal. Like Tom Araya doesn't start rapping like Limp Bizkit. Like he doesn't have the backwards red hat, and he doesn't. He doesn't start rapping or anything like that. But in terms of the music, it's definitely sort of nu metal inspired. But that's not necessary to say that there are bad songs on here or that this is necessarily a bad album. This isn't an awful album or anything like that. I would say it's decent. Stuff like State of Mind is very good as well. Love to Hate, In the Name of God, Point, which closes the album. This is pretty cool, but at the same time, In Bitter Peace is a pretty cool little opener. But overall, in terms of the actual album, the album, it's pretty forgettable, I think, because, I don't really remember too much from this one. I didn't really care much for this album, honestly, because I just found it pretty forgettable. So overall, I wouldn't really recommend this album. Just sort of forgettable in my eyes. And then we have God Hates Us All. And this was released, this is a bit of an awkward release date, because this just happened to be released on September 11th, 2001. That's an awkward release date, especially for a band like Slayer. And I also know that Nickelback's Silver Side Up album was also released on that day as well. So, and obviously today marks the 14th anniversary of those attacks, and I send my condolences to anybody to all the victims and all the victims' families and stuff like that. I send my condolences. Never forget what happened on that day. But, so, Slayer, God Hates Us All. I think this is a really underrated album, I'd say. Every time I go online and read about this album, I read a lot of hate about this album, honestly. Like, a lot of people really don't seem to like this album for whatever reason. I'm really not sure why. Because I really think this is underrated. I truly believe this is an underrated song. Underrated album. And it starts off with a bit of an instrumental, kind of, but it also has Tom Araya screaming random stuff near the end. So it's sort of, it's basically an intro to the album, basically, and it's a great intro to the album. And then we have Disciple, which is sort of like the title track, because in the chorus, or at least during the bridge, or pre-chorus, as the lyrics, God Hates Us All. And that's a real one as well. Gods and Death is a good one as well. New Faith, I really like that one. And Cast Down is great. Threshold is great as well. Stubborn Faces is really good as well. And Bloodline, I really like that one as well. That's a really good one as well. Deviants as well. Here Comes the Pain is awesome as well. And that was actually the theme song for WCW Thunder. Back around when it was starting to end. Like from 99 to around 2001. I think is when they started using that one. Because I know that it was released on the WCW Mayhem album as well. Back around 99 or so. So I think that's probably why they started using it. And Payback, the final song, that one's a really good one as well. So overall, this album is really good. Again, I do not understand why this album really gets a lot of hate. I really don't know. But overall, I think this is a really underrated album. It's heavy, it's fast, it's mid-tempo. It's sort of that, again, doing that best of both worlds kind of thing. So overall, I do not understand why this album gets so much hate from everybody. I think it's a really good album. If you haven't heard it, I'd say check it out, because I really like it. And then we get Christ Illusion, released on August 8th, 2006. And this one is the first album since Seasons in the Abyss to have Dave Lombardo back as drummer. And he makes a triumphant return here. His drumming on here, absolutely spectacular. Amazing. This one, definitely a great album. A great album. And this was the first album since Divine Intervention to have them record songs in D tuning. So that one's pretty cool as well. Though some of them are written in drop B tuning as well, and then some of them are in C tuning. So there's a lot of cool little songs like that on there. And this one, pretty cool as well. And we have Flesh Storm, which starts us off, and that's a really good one as well. Skeleton Christ is great as well. Eyes of the Insane, that's a great one. And Jihad, which was a pretty controversial song. But I think that one musically is pretty cool as well. Catatonic, really good one as well. I really like that one. That was actually the first song I actually heard from this album. And I really liked it. It has really that sort of mid-tempo kind of stuff on there. Like, I could have seen this on something like South of Heaven, or Seasons in the Abyss, or hell, even Divine Intervention. Like, it really had that kind of sound to it. And we have Black Serenade and Cult, and those are really good as well. Supremist, which is the album closer, and that's pretty cool as well. So overall, this album, really good one. I think a lot of fans liked it, I think. And personally, I really liked this album. I really liked it. Really very thrashy, sort of as Slayer sort of return to their roots, kind of, So if you haven't heard it, definitely check it out, because it's really good. And then we have World Painted Blood. and this one was released on November 3rd, 2009. And this was the first Slayer album in which I was looking forward to its release date. Like I said, I got into Slayer around late 2007 because of Guitar Hero 3, so this was the first Slayer album that I was really looking forward to. And this one I really like. I honestly, truly like it. This one is just so cool. Like the intro, World Painted Blood. And the intro to that is absolutely phenomenal. It totally gets you into that Slayer mood, and just a really great one. It's basically about the apocalypse, basically, you know. And Snuff, which is a really good one. The beginning is just absolutely phenomenal. Great guitar work by both Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman, and great one as well. Beauty Through Order, that's a really good one as well. Hate Worldwide, I really like that one. That's a really good one. Public Display Dismemberment, Human Strain, American. Playing with Dolls is a really cool one as well. I really like the first verses as well. And Tom Araya sort of does this kind of, I don't know if it would be like spoken word kind of. It's sort of like spoken words. He's like, I never thought the taste of you would be the only thing to make me bleed. Like for the first verse, he kind of does that kind of thing. And it's really cool. It's a really cool little vocal delivery. I really like that. And then the album closer, Not of This God. That one's a great closer as well, particularly midway through, where Dave Lombardo, once again shining on this album. Just does like this great drum work, and it's just really great. So overall, World Painted Blood, really good album. Much like Christ Illusion, really going back to their roots. And this album really focused on destruction, war, serial killers, the apocalypse, basically everything you would expect Slayer to do. And I really like this album. I truly, really like this album. And so, now we move on to their latest album that was released today, Repentals. And this one, this is the first one. This features a lineup change. This was the first album to feature Gary Holt on guitar following the tragic death of Jeff Hanneman just a few years ago. And also, Paul Bostaph has returned as drummer, and this is his first Slayer album since God Hates Us All. And so, we basically have a new lineup here. About half of the original Slayer lineup is gone. We have a new lineup. So it's you're sort of unsure exactly how this is going to sound. Like with Paul Bostaph, you know that he's going to be a really dependable kind of drummer. You know that he's going to be great. But with Gary Holt, who is from Exodus, while he was a great guitarist, in his own right, you weren't really too sure how he was going to be able to fit into the Slayer mold, so to speak. And this is also the band's first album to be released on Nuclear Blast Records. And, I think a lot of people, were unsure how the album would sound, but at the same time, it was also one of those albums where it was very, very expected, it's very anticipated, I should say. It's one of those most anticipated records that, male fans have been waiting for several years now. And again, much like last week with Iron Maiden's new album, this is sort of going to be like a first impression kind of thing, because I just finished listening to the album late last night. So this is going to be pretty much my first impression of the album. So it could easily change. But as far as first impressions go, I really loved the album. I really did. I really enjoyed this album. Just so great too, man. I really liked it. it definitely entertained me. It was definitely worth the wait. I think the new lineup that they have, Gary Holt, who I believe contributes to solos. I think Kerry King, for the most part, plays guitar on it. But when it comes to the solos, I think, when it comes to the solos, Gary Holt contributes as well. But this one is really cool as well. And we start off with Delusions of Savior, which is about 1 minute and 55 seconds. And it is completely instrumental. There are no vocals to it at all. And I don't know if this was Slayer's first fully instrumental album, first fully instrumental song. It may be, but it sort of reminds me of the intro to God Hates Us All, Darkness of Christ. I really like that one. And this sort of reminds me of that, sort of this mostly instrumental one. And it pretty much sets the tone for what's to come. The second one, Repentals, which is a really great one. And then Take Control is great. Vices is really good as well. That's one of the standout tracks as well. Casting for Stone, I really liked that one. And 6, When the Stillness Comes, that was a great one as well. It really sort of reminded me of, something off the South of Heaven album, combined with the intro to 213 from Divine Intervention. And I really liked that one as well. And Implode, which was the very first song that we had ever heard from the album before we even knew anything about this album. It was just released as sort of a one-off single, and that was really good as well. And then we have Piano Wire, and this is the only song on the album that featured Jeff Hanneman writing it. This was written before his death, and this one is one of the standout tracks on this one. This one is pretty much mid-tempo. But this one's really great. I really love it. Probably one of my favorite tracks off of here. And then we have You Against You, which is a really good one as well for the first 50 seconds. It almost sounds a little bit like Implode a little bit. We just sort of like this mid-tempo kind of stuff. And then once about when we hit about the 55-second mark, hit about the 1 minute mark, we get this amazing, fast-paced kind of song, and that lets you know, okay, Slayer has arrived. And we have, and the album closer, Pride and Prejudice. That one's a really good closing song as well. I really like that one. So overall, in terms of first impressions, I really liked Repentals. So far, probably my favorite record of this year. We still have a few more months until the year is done, so it could easily change. But for right now, this is definitely my favorite record of 2015, Slayer Repentals. I really liked it. If you haven't heard it yet, if you're a Slayer fan, if you're a metal fan, definitely check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Highly recommended. Really great album, and a welcome return to form for Slayer. So that's all for the Melmat podcast this week. Overall, I think Slayer, great band, one of my favorite bands of all time. I really like that thrash metal kind of sound, just classic thrash metal, just really awesome, just great. Slayer, great band. So that's all for this. So that's all for this episode of the Melmat Podcast. And I will see you all next time.